if we can give a warm welcome, I would love for you all to, in the chat or the emojis, give these individuals a warm welcome to the virtual stage with me. First off, I'd love to introduce Katerina. She's head of people and talent at Leapsome, also coming overseas. So give her some extra love for staying up late into the evening to do this with us. Amy Bayer, Global Director, DEI Engagement and Culture at Duck Creek, coming out of Chicago, and Catherine Mattis, workplace bullying expert, author, TEDx speaker, LinkedIn top voice, coming out with a new book soon that we're going to be supporting. So welcome, Catherine. I'm going to stop sharing here, and thank you to the three of you for taking some time out of your busy schedules and Katarina, in your case, staying up later in the evening to do this session with us. I'm really excited to unpack this because I feel like there's often a lot of pressures from external forces on how we should decide and navigate these decisions within our workplace. And I'm really curious of how we can arm our community and ourselves to be more intentional with these things to help really become the best workplace that we can. And but what's the tactics? Like, how do we actually align on some decisions? What are ways we can actually maybe approach our C-suite into these decisions in a more effective way versus making sometimes some very short-term, quick decisions that have long-term impacts, right? So that being said, would love to kind of go around the horn and maybe start with just introducing yourself, some of the work that you're doing, but then I would love your initial maybe perspective on like how do you just see people reacting to this decision about return to office or how work should be done? Like where do you feel like you're seeing some of these drivers come from? And Katerina, I'd love to pass it to you to start. Would love to, yeah, introduce yourself and what's your initial perspective on how companies are navigating this.
Hi, Zach. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm Kate. I'm part of the Leapsome team. I'm heading the people and the culture team, been with the company for the past 2.5 years. Actually went through quite some changes. We started office first, went remote first. Currently, we have a hybrid setup. We have a global distributed team across 2 continents. We have a presence in EMEA and North America, which obviously brings some complexity to the topic and kind of the model that we use as well. And from my perspective, I think a lot of the pressure from C-level comes from equaling presence with productivity, which is not necessarily the case. From employee perspective, what we're seeing a lot is enjoying and reaping the benefits of either remote or hybrid approach that gives a lot of flexibility, that gives a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom, and actually helps build diverse workforce because obviously different teams, different individuals have different needs and unique family or individual situations, which is why we opted for the hybrid model, but more on that a bit later on.
Yes. Well, thanks for kicking us off. And one thing I would also love to unpack with you in the group later on is also like navigating those changes in models. Like you went from in-person fully to remote fully, and then now hybrid. Like those inflection points can often cause a lot of engagement or disengagement in many ways. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. But thanks for kicking us off. Amy, welcome. Yeah, please introduce yourself and share a little bit of your initial perspective on how companies are making decisions or navigating this space.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Really great to be here. Amy Bear, and I lead DE&I culture and engagement at Duck Creek Technologies. Full disclosure, we're fully remote, or what we like to call is flexible first. We have offices, but we empower our employees to find the place where they do their best work. So if it's in the office or working from home, that's what we want them to do. And I think along the lines with Katerina, it's complicated. I don't think that there's just one easy solution right now. I think there's a lot of pressure in the workplace, and I think we're feeling that from CEOs, right? And just as Katerina says, equating a butt in a seat to mean that you're being productive. And I think it's an inflection point that we're going through because the future of work is changing. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come, but I don't think that any company has it fully figured out just yet. So I think there's a lot more that we can all learn from each other.
Thank you, Amy. And yeah, a lot to learn and unpack of like, okay, we haven't figured this out. So how do we figure this out and be more intentional with it? And I really like the point that I'll plant a seed on. We'll also revisit of like yeah, a lot of times our reactions are, well, if productivity's having issues, obviously we need to return to the office because that's going to be the savior to our productivity issues. But I mean, if we think back, I'm sure we had productivity issues back when we were fully in the office to begin with, too. So it's like, okay, is that actually being the solution here? So, all right, I'll stop there. Catherine, thanks for being here. Day two in a row as well. So for some of you that were with us yesterday, you know Catherine already, but please introduce yourself and share, yeah, what are some of your expectations, especially coming from the outside a little bit with companies
Yeah.
on this topic.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Catherine Mattice. I'm the founder of Civility Partners. We are a consulting firm that focuses on organizational development and really focused on culture. We are super specialists in turning around toxic cultures and toxic behavior. And I do have a book out. The Dummies from Wiley reached out and asked me to write a book on toxic work environments. So that's due out June 26th and 26, and Zach is going to have me back for that. So thank you for that. Yeah, I echo what Katerina and Amy said. CEOs are equating productivity to butts and seats, and I know we'll get to this later, but I think we need to do some research and have some research-based or data-backed decision making going on. Where's the proof that productivity is happening in the office versus at home? So and I just want to say, Amy, I love I think you're at the forefront of something really cool, that it's really about flex first. Wherever is your best self, that's where you should be. I've not heard that at all. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And Catherine, this is a bit of a leading question, but you being a toxic workplace expert, can you have toxic workplaces in a remote environment and an in-person environment?
100%. So I think if you're remote, it could be a little more insidious in that if, I'm a yeller, for example, and I yell in the office, everybody will hear me. But if I yell in a one-on-one with you on Zoom, people aren't going to hear me. So there is that little extra hiccup. But I would say the problems are the same no matter if you're in person or in the off or at home. That we have poor communication, we can have some bullying, we can have poor management. I mean, all the problems are maybe they look a little different, but the problems are the same. So I'm not convinced that having people back in the office really solves problems in the way that CEOs maybe think it does.
Yeah. Well, let's start to unpack some of these things. And Katerina, I'd love to pass it to you to kind of kick off this next part of the discussion, which is part of it is like you went through a few evolutions at Leapsome and Office first. Then obviously it sounds like maybe the driver for remote was the pandemic, and then now you determined hybrid first was best for the company. Can you talk to us a little bit about those inflection points, how maybe you got to those decisions, and how it all came together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our journey really mirrored the broader shifts we saw globally. So historically, like many other orgs out there, we operated in an office first model, primary work, primary interactions, all of the cultural touchstones, everything was happening around the physical office space. Team meetings, spontaneous brainstorming sessions, social events, everything was around the in-person experience. Then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, everybody went remote, which was a significant shift, not just for ourselves as the company. I think it was like a huge impact on the entire industry. And I think what was very formative in those times was actually seeing the benefits and living through the advantages of both models. So seeing the flexibility for the employees, seeing the ability to access a wider talent pool in a remote setup, especially in times of high growth, hiring, etc. But as the pandemic continued within a remote setup, we also started seeing some of the challenges. Productivity remained relatively high. I think the same happened for a lot of the companies. The market was quite booming for a lot of industries back then. But what we did see a slightly negative shift towards was collaboration started slightly dropping, employee engagement started slightly dropping, organic building of relationship across different teams or easily and fast onboarding of new joiners started taking a different shift to what we were used to. And I would say ultimately four things have led us to the decision to go hybrid. One was experiencing both models and kind of seeing and living through the benefits and cons of both. The second thing was going through the market and the talent shifts. The reality was that the workforce was changing, the entire industry was changing. Everybody did couple of successful years of remote work while productivity stayed relatively high. So nobody was going back to an in-office model, right? This was already something that has proven to work. Our company kind of stage and maturity started shifting. This all coincided with the point of time where we received our Series A funding round. We were supposed to scale massively, hire massively. We needed talent and we needed it fast. And we opened a New York office. So our team was already becoming a global distributed team, which wouldn't necessarily work in a purely in-office setup. And the last two important pieces was one, listening to the feedback from our employees during continuous pulse check surveys, internal discussions, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't for them, because at the end of the day, our talent is our biggest asset. And finally, the founder's vision and kind of the culture we wanted to build and nurture. I think for a lot of the things and a lot of the culture, at Leapsome, everything is rooted in trust in our people, offering flexibility and offering meaningful in-person connections. So this was a very crucial aspect that we also wanted to keep. So while fully embracing the benefits of remote or hybrid work, we also very much recognize and value the in-person collaborations and all of the added benefits that come from it. So ultimately, that's what has driven the decision, and that's kind of the model that we have today.
What I love about that journey is it kind of connected a few things for me, and Amy, Catherine, feel free to jump in or share what stood out to you. But it sounded like one, you were making decisions based on like the seasons of business you were in. Like you were in a season of high growth, you got investment, you needed to access top talent to reach this next stage. And the best way to access top talent is a remote environment, right? Because you're not restricted by geographic location in that case. So you kind of embraced that season of productivity and growth and accessing talent. And then you got to this next stage of your company's, seasons and existence where you go, okay, actually, let's maybe start thinking about what is our actual talent philosophy as an organization and as a CEO. And do we want to be a workplace of trust and flexibility, or what is that philosophy? And then you kind of built maybe your decisions around that. So it's kind of interesting, like for everyone listening, it's like thinking about, okay, as a business, what season are you in? And is there a certain environment you need to build to support that season of business? And then what's the philosophy behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, it was a very kind of natural process driven by all of those things. It kind of happened in a very gradual, spontaneous way, driven by both internal and external happenings, which is obviously quite different if you have a mandate to run and not something necessarily either you or the team agrees to.
Yeah. Amy, you've shared a lot about how your decisions at Duck Creek, or the organization's decisions, were somewhat rooted more in like a talent philosophy versus I don't know, some other maybe factors of pressure. So yeah, can you tell us about that for you?
Sure, happy to do that. So, pre 2020, so pre-pandemic, we really did base a lot of our talent decisions on offices. So if you couldn't live near an office or commit to that, then we lost out on some great talent. And we really wanted everybody to be in the office. And, that was the push and the strategy. Pandemic happened, us along with all other companies started to work remotely 100% across the company. Within that time, we were doing great as a company, just like Katerina, and we went public. So fast forward to a year later, we have a new chief people officer and our CEO. One of the first mandates that he said he wanted to work with her on is like, we've got to figure this out. What are we going to do? But you couldn't argue that we weren't being very successful as a company. We were. We'd gone public. And so, we started to work and research what are other companies doing. And then we started to really listen to our employees and the things that we were hearing. We had employees who were in Mumbai were they would say, "Hey, Mumbai mom here. Thank you so much that I don't have a 2-hour commute in the morning time to start work." We were hearing from our employees, wow, this is really affecting and impacting in a positive way our well-being, our work-life integration. And so when we were looking at it, we were like, okay, we gotta keep going with this, but we need to let our employees treat them like adults. Let them figure out where did they do their best work. We did not want to get caught up in the mandates or the tracking. That just wasn't who we were as a company. We really always have operated from that high trust culture. And so it felt like Katerina said, it just felt seamless too. It was the right thing to do. And here we are 2025. It's working really well for us as a company. We are able to hire so many talented people across the company. But if there are people who want to be in an office, we do have options for them as well.
I would love for you to, could you maybe expand also on the journey of that? Like, it sounds like there's a lot of listening going on. You're also reflecting on the state of the business and how things were very successful. And I think it's like, okay, if something's working, like, don't try to fix something that's not broken,
Right.
right? And Mariana in the chat even shared, right? She's trying to develop this talent philosophy, but there's still leaders that are maybe in the pre-pandemic era and there's change management needed. Like, did you face some of that resistance as you were going through this too? Like, were there leaders who were like, yeah, we're productive, but I'm still in my old era of how work gets done? And like, did you have to get, like, was there some change management, some narrative changing? Like, how did
Yeah.
you navigate that?
Well, and you and I've talked about this too. And it came from a place of not fear. As we stepped into this, it came from a place of confidence. So I think that's a good time to be making decisions as a company. And as I was reflecting on that, sure, we did have some leaders that maybe this just wasn't a part of who they were, or they couldn't tap into that other set of tools that you need to be this leader in this flexible first environment, because it is using a different tool set. But I think what we really anchored back to is, okay, this is who we are. This is our culture. This is what we find our employees do the best with. And so there's just people who that is just not their thing. And we want to keep everybody that we can, but if you don't want to be on that journey with us, then it was time that maybe they find a different company to work with. If that makes sense. I would say more outliers who weren't leaning into this. Now, I'm not going to say that it's not hard and it's not bumpy and that we got to keep working at it. It's definitely a journey, not a destination. As I said, I don't think anybody has it figured out. So I know we're going to talk about it later. Like, there's things that we keep doing to be intentional about it. But no, I really want to be honest with you. I wouldn't say that we had a lot of leaders that this was a challenge with overall. I think and we talked about this, if you had probably issues with someone in their what's going on at work and productivity, you probably would have had those issues in an office or remotely. And, being in an office is not the magic bullet. That isn't going to all of a sudden make someone more productive. I think it's really a different issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that you also pointed out like our decisions weren't being driven from a place of fear or insecurity or control, and it really just came from more of this side of empowerment and values, as well as like truly like what's gonna provide us the biggest impact on the business, like productivity wise, and let's embrace these things. And I think a hard commitment that I think some organizations have that have hard time making is like really defining who are we, and let's stay connected to that at the core, and let's really be disciplined with our decisions with who we are, and that may weed out some people
Yeah.
that don't align with it, and you kind of have to accept that a little bit. um Catherine, for you, I know you come into a lot of situations where change management is needed and there's disruptive narratives that you kind of have to kind of push through.
Mhm.
What has been some of your experience, or how are you seeing some of this from like how people are approaching this RTO mandate, and also how you approach maybe some of the narrative changing that Mariana is facing?
Yeah, and I'm gonna circle back to Stacy's put a question in there about Gen Z. So I have all sorts of things on my mind. One is, as a consultant, we don't like to give advice to clients unless we know things. We need data. So always start with data. That's how you change the narrative for leaders. So if you're doing any sort of survey already, you can find some answers to things like where are you most productive? And I'll also say, we talked about this yesterday, and this comes up a lot in my world. If you're doing an employee engagement survey, great, but that does not tell you about your culture. So that is a different survey. So just be aware of that. So if you're going to do a culture survey or what we call a climate assessment, that's going to give you more information about how people are feeling and how people perceive your culture. But circling back to engagement, that a lot of times things happen in silos. Returning to work, our engagement initiatives, our DEI initiatives, our well-being initiatives, and that's a mistake. So leaders really need to see, like, if your goal is engagement, which that's a hot topic right now and has been for several years, it seems like mandating return to work goes against that building of engagement. And I think we all know at least one person who's being forced to go back to work, and that's driven their engagement down because they're not happy about it. I shared a story before about somebody at a company who had bought a house. It's like an hour and a half away from work because there were no signs that they were going to have to return to work. And now all of a sudden they have to return to work. He's got a 3-hour commute or a 2-hour commute all of a sudden. And so obviously he's less engaged than he was before. So really being intentional about your decisions and looking at how everything works together. So sometimes, to go back to your question, Zach, is like, what kind of a culture is this company trying to build? Looking at your core values, does mandating return to work go against your core values? I would argue that if something like diversity is in your core values, that mandating return to work goes against that. I'm a single mom and I own my business, so thank God, because I can come and go as needed. But if I work in a company that's requiring me to drive, an hour away to get to the office, and my kids are over here where I live, that makes my work-life balance very difficult. And I'll just add one other thing. Everybody works better in different places, as Amy has pointed out, and also at different times. So maybe that's pushing the envelope a little much, but I do really great work between like 10 p.m. and midnight because it's quiet. I've been processing things all day. So I'm pretty productive during those hours. If I'm mandated to go back to an office and I'm forced to work between 9 to 5, that's not helping my productivity. So
Yeah. I think it goes back to some of the stuff you're sharing too, of like what's the ultimate driver of these decisions, and if it's our talent philosophy, is it certain belief systems, is certain outputs that you're going for, like is engagement the thing that you're going for and you're making decisions that impact engagement, or productivity again is another example. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, how and where and when is the best model to achieve those results, and are you using data and insights from your people to feed that decision versus just maybe providing your narrow viewpoint and perspective on it and saying, okay, well, that's how I work best. I work best in the office from 8 to 4, and that's my most productive time. So that should be our model as a company. But as you shared, you're like, no, for me, I work best from 10 p.m. to midnight. Like that's some of my most productive hours. So if productivity was the goal that I was trying to unlock for my team and you're on my team, obviously I should embrace a flexible model to allow you to do that, right?
Yeah. I just sorry, I want to add one other thing. I think like Katerina's company, we all have Amy, it sounds like you've got a global workforce too, as do I. My global workforce is small and mighty, but there's a lot of things that you can do in a remote or hybrid environment that you can also do in the office. We have the technology for that. I see my employees face to face over Zoom fairly regularly. And of course, we chat about things all the time, and we have a lot of fun in our chats. And so I think if you have to pick one, that the hybrid is the best. To circle back to Stacy's comment about Gen Z, maybe they want to be in person more. Great. Give them a spot to come in person. I like to be in person, but sometimes I like to be at home. So I don't know. I feel like or hybrid's probably the best way to get at what everybody needs.
And I jump in too, because Jennifer's got a question in the chat. And just like what Catherine's saying, I think everybody at different parts of their career need to seek out what works for them or can, help them the best. I was just sharing with Zach, I have a son entering the workforce, and the company he's going to be working at, they've switched from hybrid to 5 days a week in the office. But maybe as an early career professional, that's a great place for him to be. Myself, like Catherine, I've have some years. I'm most productive right now working in this flexible first environment. So Jennifer, I think that there's not a hard and fast rule. I think everybody needs to find the workplace that works for them. But I will say, and if anybody, Katerina, I don't know if you want to add to this, or Catherine, we've had no shortage of career growth and promotions. I feel like my own self is an example. I was able to move from being an HR business partner into this new role. And this has been probably the most engaging and exciting role I've ever had in my career. So I've done this at a fully remote company for the last 5 years.
Yeah, Katerina, could you maybe provide some of insight on the experience of how maybe you've embraced Gen Z or younger generations, or how that maybe guided some of the decisions to being in person or hybrid? Because that was something Amy and I were talking about before too. I was like thinking about earlier in my career, those in-person experiences being new to the workforce were invaluable, right? Like the mentorship, the connections that come from it. But now, a little more ahead in my career, I'm like, no, remote environment. This is an environment I'm really productive in. But I see a lot of value from those in-person engagements early on. So was that part of some of the things that you're seeing too, or making decisions around of like, hey, if we're having newer teams, or if we're having a workforce that's going to include a younger generation or a newer generation entering the workforce, maybe we should have an in-person or hybrid arrangement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think majority of the organizations today have like at least 3 different generations they're employing with different needs, with unique setups and kind of different contexts. And they get motivated from different incentives. They prefer different hours. They're their best at. We have plenty of young people who do a lot of work from anywhere. And that was actually something that came through listening to the employees and their feedback. So we implemented a couple of different policy to tailor to different needs. So we do have flexible working hours, flexible locations, which obviously works great for parents. We do have flexible vacation policy whereby every employee can opt and use up to 40 days PTO per year if they wanted to, which can be beneficial also for parents. The same way it can be beneficial for younger people. We have sabbatical. We have couple of months per year working from anywhere in the world. And what we've seen is sometimes you tend to think that, hey, this is something that's actually more beneficial for one generation or one type of people. And then you start implementing it and you see that actually it's beneficial to the majority of the company. And I think like having that aspect of what tailors to everybody's needs, but also what can uniquely satisfy the needs, the flexibility that different types of people and different type of generations in the company need is actually the best way to go forward.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here too, Zach? Because I love all that's in the chat. I also want to say, even within our flexible first remote environment, doesn't mean that we never come together. So I think that that's a myth as well. And, you know, I think early on, even our CEO was like, well, let's just, let's have a social event or let's bring lunch in. That's going to bring people in. And we learned that still doesn't bring people into the office, right? People don't really, that's not a driver for them. They might just go to the social event. They're not going to come to the office. And so where we really tried to focus at and being intentional is around those moments of impact. When we're having, a reason to bring our team in, let's bring them in to meet. So we still do meet as a group. And what I find is I don't need to do that all the time. But when I do, even with my small and mighty team, it really fills the cup for us. It really helps us. It keeps us more connected. One example that like a moment of impact, we have an in-person summit that we hold. And then what happens is that we got people coming in, and then people also tag in other work meetings around that. So they're meeting with their team. And so everybody kind of uses it. So we really want to focus on those moments of impact. And again, not just having people to come in just to come in.
I want to add, based on what I see in the chat there about mentoring, and employees need to be intentional about growth opportunities too. And that's a great point. And I think high performers, which we all want in our organization, are going to do that. The organization has to facilitate, the ability for them to do that, so they're not in a black hole. But so high performers are going to seek mentors anyways, whether they're in the office or not. And I'll just share, I mean, I had a mentor way back when I started my business through my professional association, ATD, which many of you may know. We didn't work together. That was very remote. She's the one who came up with my company name, Civility Partners, and she's still super important to me. And that's a little bit different because we didn't work together, but we had a virtual mentor relationship, and it was very impactful. I had sought out a mentor in ATD, and she was willing to do it for me. But it's being in the office doesn't solve problems.
And some of the stuff that I wanted to build off of too, with a quick perspective on like being intentional about getting more career growth opportunities and exposing people who work working remotely to those opportunities they engage with, because often so many of our models for promotions for people who get access to coaches and leadership development programs, it's sometimes a very subjective process where they're saying that, hey, I engage with Zach all the time. I see him as a high potential leader, so I'm going to enroll him into this mentorship or this career opportunity, right? So it's sometimes a very political game where we need to create better, I guess, talent identification practices that take the subjective nature out of it and helps you identify who your high performers are that might be hiding in the virtual silos, right? Like, how can we tap into them because they're not maybe as loud as Zach is in certain scenarios, right? So that's another thing I would encourage all of you to think about, especially if you're embracing that flexible remote workplace. How do you identify top talent, high performers? And is that a subjective bias kind of flow there where you're only maybe picking up on the loudest virtual employee, right? So it's like, how can we find those silent performers and bring them into these career opportunities and things like that? Amy, go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think one way we also do this as well is with our employee resource groups. We've also got some opportunities. We've got an employee experience council or a DEI advisory board. These are the ERGs are employee led. And as we know, leadership's a behavior, not a title. So here are employees that are raising their hand, want to impact our culture positively. They're leading groups. They're working on skills that maybe they haven't had the chance or want to really work on a little bit more in a safer, braver space. And so this has been a really great way to get visibility, to get talented people, more time meeting people, across the company. Our executive leadership team, our SLT members, they're executive sponsors. So I find too, that's another way that has worked really well for us.
I love that, right? Leveraging these other peer-to-peer like communities and groups to bring
Yes.
those opportunities to life, and not having again like to rely on some of these in-person engagements. And Katerina, do you have any additional thoughts on this, especially as right where we think like, okay, if we're going to be flexible, if we're going to be remote, we need to be more intentional about how collaboration is supported. Can you give some examples or ways of how you do that in a remote or in office environment?
Yeah, I think as we've already mentioned, like just bringing people to the office won't magically enhance collaboration or productivity or by default mean better career growth for majority of the people that are in the office versus the people that are remote potentially. What we try to do is we look at both setups and how we can enhance both of those and add values to the employees. Like one very simple example for the in-office presence and collaboration, we do have assigned team office days, especially in our New York office. It's a newer team. It's also a smaller team. So actually it works much better when the majority of the people go there on the same days and can actually meet in person, engage with each other, and kind of intentionally designing the schedule and the structure behind those days, not just to be physically present, but actually facilitate something that's intentionally either collaborative or building that connection and relationship. A lot of the teams use those days for strategic planning sessions, brainstorming sessions, anything where you get in a room together and kind of do a creative, collaborative brainstorming. But also a lot of our company communication, like the all hands, the leadership things, the board meetings are facilitated, the one-on-ones, the team weeklies, the team lunches, the social aspect of it, like whether it's welcoming a new joiner and having a happy hours after that with the majority of the team to welcome that person. A lot of those things are intentionally designed and facilitated around those two office days. So being very intentional and having in mind that that serves for both work purposes, whether it's collaboration, whether it's focus work, but also having informal interactions that actually build those bonds and builds that relationship and culture around the company. And for the remote setup, I think two things have been super helpful and useful for us. And I think Catherine slightly mentioned this before. We do invest a lot in tools and structured processes that does facilitate that effective collaboration despite the physical distance. So there's plenty of things from whiteboarding tools, communication tools, strategy docs, collaboration docs where people can asynchronously do their work and collaborate with each other without sometimes the gaps of time zone difference or location difference or physical difference does facilitate and help a lot in that process. And then two, I think Catherine also mentioned this before, like having that social aspect remotely as well. Like one super easy win for us has been we do have what we call a social coffee channel within our Slack environment. It's super easy. You just hit join. Everything happens automatically. You randomly get paired with a different person every week. So you kind of interact from people across the different teams, across the different offices that you might not interact with on regular basis. And that facilitates a lot of that engagement, a lot of that community piece in a very natural and unforced manner. So I would say the key is don't leave collaboration to chance, don't leave culture to chance, don't leave productivity to chance, and just hope that, hey, if people are in the office, things are magically going to happen. But actively think about, hey, what's the type of work that people benefit from most when they're in person, and kind of strategically design the office experience around that and the value it brings to the employees. And on the other side, look at what are the added benefits for the remote experience, what's the flexibility people need, and strategically tailor that within your talent management, within your strategy, within your business objectives, and so on and so forth.
I love that. Like both environments, you had to design mechanisms to get those things going, right? Like neither of them just instantly created this output. Like there were still operations and mechanisms that were intentionally designed to lead to a certain thing, whether it was collaboration, productivity, communication, and things like that. Yeah, I love Catherine. I double down on the coffee. We did a program once with a group called Walkie Talks, and it was very similar. Like we just matched random people across the company together for 30-minute walkie talks. Almost had like a little bit of a well-being element to it as well. So they literally would go on a walk within whatever neighborhood or area in the world they were, and they would spend the 30 minutes with the 2 or 3 prompts we provided them to talk through and have a little bit of a connection point. So one, it got them to disconnect from like staring at a screen all day. So it's like that break from a productivity standpoint is really important. But also now you're engineering the connection piece. And in some cases, the company actually started uh, pairing walkie talks across departments that they were looking for more cross department collaboration around, right? So it's like, okay, if we are trying to get sales and customer success to work better together so that sales is doing a better job at teeing up new partners into the client base. Let's pair those departments together for these type of engagements, right? So Amy, do you have any examples or ways you've also navigated this, especially as we see, communication or collaboration often the thing that struggles within this
Yeah.
hybrid or flexible work environment? How have you addressed this?
Yeah, and before I do, I just want to tell you, I love the walkie talks. So just like Katarina, and sounds like you, we've just launched that. We call it Creek Connect, where we're going to have the random pairings. But I love the fact of you adding in the well-being part and then the departments. That's genius. So great takeaway. I know some on my team are listening, so noted all of that. That's so great. Just yeah, as Katarina says, you can't leave it to chance, right? You have to be intentional. As we said, like there's a new toolkit that you have to use in this virtual environment or even the hybrid environment. And so we part of our listening is the engagement strategy. And what we've seen as a strength from this flexible first environment is having work-life balance. For 3 years, this has been one of our top strengths. But I know, as I said before, that this is a journey, not a destination. So we got to keep working at it. So we're really working with personally across the company, getting the insights from the ways that you're working. So kind of gleaning what you can from that. But then the leaders, they're also having macro themes and trends that they can see from how their teams are working. And then I'm also going to be looking at that organizationally and then really taking some intention from what we're finding and setting strategies. So that is something that we have just been kicking off. What I'm hoping to do too is to take that data and take it with our engagement survey data and really say, okay, this is what's going on with the teams and this is how they're working. How can we then take both data points and start to make things better? Because as I said, I don't think anybody has this figured out, but this is the future. And I really want to be a part of shaping it and not being reactive to it. So that is one thing I'll pause. We have other things, but I'm sure, Catherine might have something to share.
Yeah, I've got some ideas as well. We don't do this anymore. We did it during COVID. So maybe we'll bring it back. Two things we maybe need to bring back. One is we used to just have an office on Google Meet and people could just be in there. And so like and it could feel micromanaging in the wrong culture. In my culture, civility partners, it was just more like, because if you're working in a cubicle next to someone, what happens? Where's the connection? You chit chat about things or, oh, I just talked to that client again. That's annoying. And you talk about it, right? So it was kind of that same vibe where it was like we just all were in there and we would sometimes it was silent and we were just working and doing our thing, but it facilitated that ability to walk across to somebody's desk and have a conversation with them. And so just having this like open office space virtually for people to go. the other thing that, because working next to somebody doesn't mean you communicate well with them or can collaborate well with them. It's that moment of impact, the really intentional connections, right? So one thing that we were doing, and we need to bring it back. I know Jenny's here from my team. So Jenny, can you help us? We do an impact lunch where once a month we were all coming together, and it started to where we were supposed to be talking about impacts we've had on clients, where, the goal was like, here's this client we're working with. I did a training, it was really impactful, or here's some coaching moments I had with someone and it was great. But it ended up actually really just being a love fest where it's really shifted to, hey, Jenny, you really had a big impact on me when you did this thing and you did it so well. Or, it just turned into, how we've been impacting each other, and then clients kind of became secondary.
I think there's a lot of power when you have, especially when times are tough, right? Like if the business isn't doing as well, there's like different pressures economically, and it's just like times are really tough to drive results and you're working really hard. Having that peer-to-peer like shared experience can be the differentiator to push your business through it, right? And creating this like sense of shared fate that we're in this together and we're going to battle through this tough time as a team. That's incredibly powerful. So having like what you just shared, like being able to design like this like shared experience that you're not alone trying to battle through this really tough time and environment is what will get your company and your team and that individual through it in the long run, right? And so how can you design that, whether that's like I remember, yeah, being in the person in the sales pit, they're making cold calls, everyone's getting told no. It's not as bad when everyone's getting told no together, like it's a little bit easier to navigate. So okay, we have a couple minutes left here. I would love some closing thoughts here for the group, especially as they think about, okay, how do we return with intention being the theme, and how do we help our leadership team, our organization be more intentional around these decisions, around how we work and guide them to a better, more productive way. So I'd love some closing thoughts around that. Like one, it sounds like listening is really important, like truly listening and gathering data from the field. And how are you actually taking feedback from your people and having data to support your decisions versus just what you feel is best. So maybe provide how you're doing that, or just provide some thoughts on like how maybe we can continue to be more intentional with these decisions. And Katerina, I'd love to pass it to you first.
I think what really worked for us quite well, despite the listening piece, which is super important, is opening lines of communications both ways, not just to listen to the employees, but also continuously communicating why the model you've picked or you have is the model you believe in, what's the added value out of it, and what do you actually want to achieve with the setup that you've come up with. To invest in connection opportunities, whether that's virtual, whether that's in person, bring the intentionality to it, and design them in a strategic way and format that kind of creates win-win scenarios for both the employees and the business. Third piece, what's very important is ensure your managers are well empowered and enabled to kind of manage that setup, whether that's remote or hybrid or in office. Ensure you give them the tools and the techniques and the resources they need to actually manage, whether it's distributed or global workforce. We've talked quite a lot about leveraging technology. I think nowadays we're especially lucky in that sense. We have quite a lot of tools, quite a lot of systems and resources we can use to actually enhance that experience for both sides. And final thought, I would say it's never a done process. Like maybe hybrid is what works for us today the best, but potentially 5 years down the lane, it's something completely different. So I think it's also very important to stay agile, stay adaptable, and kind of like move with the shifts of the business, of the market, and of the talent.
I love that. We didn't really get into this much, but like how you communicate the narrative and communicate the intention, super important. So it's okay to return to the office, but have a powerful reason and a way to communicate why, so people can, understand at least at a bare minimum. So well, I don't know, Amy, Catherine, if she left anything for you two, but yeah, Amy, any additional like thoughts here on like returning with intention, ways to kind of really navigate that in a more effective way forward?
Yeah, and I don't want to repeat. So I think we talked a lot about listening, but I think it's also where I come from is we're all a part of this. We all own the culture of the company. Have the employees be the co-creators of the solution, right? If we don't like the way things are going, or we want to change as a company, we need to all be doing it and owning it together. So I think that that's a really important piece, and that they are our biggest asset. And so let's treat them all like adults, and really empower our employees, because at the end of the day, that is going to impact their engagement, and they are going to be able to, when you take away all the noise, they're going to be able to do their best work, and that's what we really want, and give people a purpose.
Yes. Thank you, Amy. All right, Catherine, bring us home.
All right, I know we're at time. I'll be short and sweet. I'm gonna go circle back to the managers. We all know people leave managers, not jobs, right? So wherever your people working, managers always need more education and tools than they're probably getting now. And making sure that managers have the time to actually manage, we had a client that their top manager was like 120% billable, and then people complained that she was kind of a bully, and I'm like, well, because she's so overwhelmed, how is she possibly managing if she's 100%, 120% of her day is billable hours with clients? So making sure that managers have the tools. Someone had said management by walking around virtually. It's absolutely possible. Hop on a Zoom call or a Google Meets, have a chat, find out how people are doing. That's the best way to build that connection.
Well, thank you for bringing that home. I think that's such an incredible final point of how essential our leaders are in the results of these decisions, right? Like if you're having communication issues, it depends on how well leaders can communicate remotely or in person. So it doesn't really matter. So, invest in your people, listen to them. I'd say treat it like a little bit of an experiment. Have a theory. If your theory is in person's the best, go gather some data and feedback to back that up, right? And really get some insights from the field to test that theory. So, overall, I think though, co-create it with your people as Amy's shared. Thank you again, everyone, for joining though. This was a great hour. Can we give our three incredible leaders some appreciation and a round of applause for spending some time out of their busy schedules as well. And I applaud all of you for joining too, for investing time out of your days to grow, to develop, to contribute to building a better world of work. And grateful to have you on the journey with us. So that being said, we are all cut for today. Hope to see you again at the next one. Have a great rest of your afternoons. And yeah, we'll see you in the future. Thanks, everyone.